This is Food for Thought with Deborah Walker. Today on Food for Thought, I have Janet Thomson, life coach with a master's degree in nutrition and exercise science. She's an NLP master practitioner, thought field therapist, registered clinical hypnotherapist, as well as being a best-selling author, television presenter, resident health and fitness expert and life coach for ITV, as well as she has her own private clients. Phew, welcome to Food for Thought, Janet.
Hello, thank you very much.
When I read your bio, I was absolutely astonished, and the first thought that came into my head was, how on earth do you fit it all in?
Well, yes, speaking as one busy lady to another, it's much easier when you've got a passion for what you do. You just find the time, and actually so much of what I do overlaps and there's synergy between everything. So I just think of it as one job, not lots of different ones, so it's not so bad.
What led you to do all of your training? Because you actually really are widely trained across a number of fields outside nutrition. What's your personal driving force?
Well, when I was at school, going back a long time, I wasn't that academic, but I did quite like PE, the indoor stuff, I hasten to add, not the cross-country stuff. And so when I left school, I went to college and did a course which was a certificate in recreation, which basically taught you how to teach ladies keep fit classes. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I started off doing it part-time while I went through college, literally at the age 16, 17. And I've just really built on that ever since. I've got such a kick out of helping people feel better. I would do these big sessions in the sports hall for ladies and then give little talks about how to be healthy, and it was just fantastic. And so all the training that I've ever done has been adding to those skills so that I could do that job better. So I guess in some ways I've got the same job that I had when I was 16. I've just got a bit better at it.
So have you continually trained whilst working?
Yeah, I have, and having children and all the rest of it, and that worked really well for me because I could run fit classes in the evenings when the children were in bed and my husband was looking after them, or sometimes in the mornings with a very helpful mother who would babysit. So it was a career that I didn't have to put on hold at all whilst I had my 3 children.
That's truly inspiring for a lot of women to hear, I have to say, for me in particular. Now, the diet industry is a huge industry, absolutely enormous, and it makes phenomenal profits. But your book shows that you've got such a deep understanding about why diets really, that most people are following, truly don't work. And that's because it's a deeper, more emotional and psychological reasons why this is the case.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I have to say, when I finished working as head of training for the fitness club and opened my own clubs, it was because I felt passionately that you can't just give people a diet, that they need so much more support than that. And so I was running these slimming groups within, I had a chain of 3 health clubs in the Midlands. And what I found was I'd do these talks and I started calling it Power to Change, because I wanted people to be able to change how they think and literally give themselves the power to change how they think and feel. And what I found was that the talks were 2 hours and they started off sort of 80% about what you should eat, and they ended up about 5% what you should eat and 95% in how you think and on your mindset. And that's when I decided to train first actually as a clinical hypnotherapist. I thought, well, I'll just hypnotise them all to pieces and help them change. And of course, I soon realised that people have to actually want to change. But self-hypnosis is an incredibly powerful tool. And a lot of the techniques in the book are directly or indirectly based around self-hypnosis and self-direction. And then I thought, yeah, that's great, that works well. And then I added NLP to it. And then I discovered thought field therapy, which is amazing. And I was lucky enough to write Tapping for Life, which is a thought field therapy book. And what I found was I was learning all these techniques to support weight loss and health and fitness classes. But actually, all of these techniques are important for all of us, because you've got to be able to communicate properly with yourself, because your body is a visual representation of how you feel about yourself and how you treat yourself. It's more visible than any scar. you are exactly how you feel about yourself.
I did think it was interesting when you make the point in the book that effectively your body is just a representation of what is going on in your mind.
Yeah, and I have a really strong belief, and it's not a religious belief in any way, but a very strong spiritual belief that there is a part of all of us that is not physically human, whether you call it your soul or your essence, or whether that's your connection with God, or whatever that means to you. I have such a strong knowing that we have a part of us that isn't physical, and that our body is what we carry that round in. And if you had something in your house that was so precious, it was beyond priceless, you wouldn't stick it in an old cardboard box. You would put it in something really precious, and you would look after it and nurture it and make sure it's safe. And for me, that's what the mind-body connection is. And weight loss is really nothing to do with weight loss, and everything to do about protecting this vessel, if you like, that we carry this amazing part of us, this spirit around in. And I think we have to honour that.
I just love that. And I think that, the Zen philosophy of the way you do anything is the way you do everything is very much encompassed in your book.
Good, thank you. That's certainly what I wanted to get across. And I've worked with so many people. I'm 51 now, and I started doing this when I was 16. And I've had the privilege of working with lots of people, and of all the training courses and degrees and everything else I've done and got, that pales into insignificance really with what you learn, and you'll know this as well, from working with people. It's people that teach you. And so what I've done is taken the best of everything I've ever learned for people and put it in a book, which I believe is, well, I am going to blow my own trumpet. I believe it is the best weight loss book ever, mainly because it's not about weight loss, if that doesn't sound like a contradiction. It's about looking after yourself and honouring yourself physically, mentally, spiritually and emotionally, so you get the whole package.
And in regards to your book, I found it absolutely fascinating. I get given a lot of diet books from my clients. Most of my clients have gone through diet after diet after diet, and I end up having to read the newest diet on the block because to keep up with the type of things they'll be doing to themselves. And when I got a copy of your book, I have to say I wasn't particularly looking forward to reading it. And then as I started reading it, it was like, can you just leave me alone? I'm reading Janet's book.
How lovely. Thank you. And quite a few people have said to me, you write as you speak, and it's as if you're talking to us. And that's what I do. I'll sit down and let's say I've just been working with a client that day or whatever. If I'm then writing a chapter of the book, I will imagine that person in front of me, so that it is written very much as if I'm talking to you and from the heart.
Such a breath of fresh air, absolutely. Because what you've done is very much taken, as you say, all of the sort of self-hypnosis, the self-direction, and also the intuitive side of the body, the wisdom side of the body, and the ability for the cells to know what they should be doing. And actually you've encompassed that in your book. And you very rarely see that in dieting books, where they're generally menu planning instead. You where you're told what to do, and you're very much disempowered by most dieting books. What you've done is almost taken the self-help kind of the NLP side that you'd normally see as a practitioner, or your business books, and placed it into dieting.
Yeah, and it does turn it all on its head, but to be honest, I think that's what it needed, because if we look at the diet industry, it's the same people that keep dieting, and there is no other product. If you went and bought a certain make of car, let's say, for example, a Peugeot, and it broke, you wouldn't go back and buy another Peugeot. And then when that broke, didn't work, go back, keep buying a Peugeot. I have to say I have a very reliable Peugeot. Use it as an example. You wouldn't keep going back buying anything that didn't work. And yet people go back and buy another diet, another diet, another diet, another diet. And for me, the most important thing is to acknowledge that everything you do starts with a thought. Everything. And even behaviors that have become habits that you consciously don't think about, subconsciously, that connection was made with a thought. So let's say, for example, you get into a habit of, I don't know, every time you put fuel in the car, you buy a bar of chocolate, and you do it habitually without thinking. But the first time you did it, you thought, I will buy a bar of chocolate. And it started, and then because you repeated it, it became a habit. So everything we do is based on a thought, and hence the title of the book, Think More and Eat Less. Because if you think more about what you're doing and the effect that it's having on you, then you naturally start to want to change, because we all have two minds, a conscious mind and an unconscious mind, or a subconscious. And your subconscious mind wants to protect you, and it will only let you do things that it believes are good for you. But you have to tell it what's good for you. So if you, as a 12-year-old say, oh, it is good to smoke, I am going to look cool if I smoke, and all my friends will think I'm great and I'm rebelling against my parents, and that's good. Your unconscious doesn't question that. It just goes, oh, right, okay, smoking's good. And so if you want to stop smoking later, you've got to find something that's more powerful and more emotive than that desire to look good when you were 12, to disconnect that association and put something else in its place. So change is possible, and it is a case of, well, it's easy to change. The problem is it's also easy not to change. And it's not just about, oh, well, yeah, I'll get my head around it and I'll use willpower. As you'll know from the book, I don't believe in willpower. It does not exist. There is only ever choice. And it's a case of learning to work your brain in the same way you learn to work a new phone or a new computer, so that your unconscious gets on board with your highest good, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, the whole package. And when you naturally look at a bar of chocolate and have no desire for it whatsoever, then of course your body's going to change shape, and you haven't got to use willpower, and you haven't got to feel deprived and all those other things. So that's what I wanted to do, is give people a step-by-step guide as to how they can go back in and literally disconnect old programming and replace it. And you'll know at the end of every chapter is Mabel's story, which brings it all to life, really. And she's a genuine character. She's not quite 5 foot, and she was a size around 24, 26. I mean, she was a really big girl, and she got down to a size 10 in 18 months. And she kept phoning me and emailing me saying, I've gone down another dress size, still don't feel like I'm on a diet. And I kept saying to her, that's because you're not. You're just thinking differently. And I think her story is, when I wrote it based on her notes and conversations with her, it's a bit like a Bridget Jones section at the end of every chapter, isn't it? So, in the book I chat about this technique, that technique, and then I've included her journal extracts of how she got on trying that particular technique. And I think that also gives it a reality that people can totally connect with.
Now, lots of people would balk at the thought of actually taking nearly 18 months to lose weight. But you tell the story of the 3 daughters in the book, and about how they take the routes to actually a healthier life, and that faster isn't always better is effectively the moral of the story, isn't it?
It is. And your body will change shape at the rate that, it's ready and able to do so in a physical way that it can sustain for a long period of time. And I mean, Nikki lost about 7 dress sizes in that period. So that's not bad going for somebody who didn't feel remotely like they were on a diet. If you've got more to lose, it tends to come off more quickly at the beginning. But I think it's quite reasonable to expect to lose a dress size every 4 to 6 weeks, depending how many changes you make. But a dress size a month on average for the first few months is totally normal.
I did think it was interesting as well, the point you make about the associations, because I worked in an environment for a period of time where they had masses of cake and biscuits around. I'd never seen anything like it. It was like a party day every day. And they thought nothing of this, but they'd say to me, oh, we can put all of the cake and biscuits next to you because you never touch them. And they think, that, and they would say to me, how can you stay on that regime? And I'd say, that's because I look at them and I don't associate good things with them. I associate the fact that I'm going to have, it'll hurt my joints, it'll make me feel ill, it won't give me the mindset that I want, it won't give me the body that I want.
Yeah, exactly. And nothing tastes that good, does it?
No.
Nothing tastes that good that you're willing to give that up. I had a client not very long ago, and I said to her, what's the thing you hate most about being overweight? And she's really big girl, morbidly obese. And she said, well, I'm a single mum, and I used to take my son out for a ride on, we'd go out on our bikes, and I'm so big now I can't get on my bike. And I've had to lie to him and say the pedals have broken. And she'd taken one of the pedals off her bike to make it look broken. And then she went on to say, oh, but I can't stop eating chocolate fudge brownies. I make them every day, made a batch every single day, and ate the whole batch. And I said, well, do they taste better than that hurts? Mm-hmm. And, it was quite a shock for her to think, well, actually, no, they don't. And that was the beginning of a big change for her to think, and I did a visualization exercise with her, actually, imagining that a chocolate brownie was the shape of a bike pedal and, really linking the two together to make it easier for her unconscious mind to connect that this is the cause of the problem. This brownie, which is pretending to be something amazing and lovely, is actually killing me and killing my relationship with my son. And suddenly it started to lose its appeal.
It's interesting, isn't it? I also found the comment in your book about overeating being considered the same as abuse to yourself and self-harming. It's a really strong comment to make in many respects, but I actually hit home with myself. But I can imagine that, other people have kind of been quite taken aback as well by that.
Well, when I first submitted the manuscript and showed it to a few people to test, that was the one comment in the book that everybody came back and said, that's a bit strong. Are you sure you want to put that? And I said, yes, because until people accept, certainly the case that I was just telling you about, that eating that chocolate brownie was self-harming. Mm-hmm. It was harming her physically, it was harming her emotionally, her as a mother. On every level, that one behaviour was worse than self-harming. And, she wouldn't sit in front of her son and take a razor to her arms or do anything else that we would consider as, if you like, traditional self-harm or more common type of self-harm. And yet it is absolutely that. And this is where your unconscious mind will start to protect you, that once it realizes that what you're doing is harming you, it naturally will change your preferences.
Why do you think so many people have turned to food in the way they have done nowadays, Janet?
I think it's conditioning. And certainly when I was young, I'm the only person in my family that's not overweight. And when I was young, my mother, I never had an apple that wasn't cut into quarters and given to me on a saucer of sugar so that we would dip that in the sugar and eat it to make it nice. If I ever fell over and grazed my knee or lost a shoe or, broke my skipping rope, anything at all, my mum would say, oh, Janet, stop crying, darling, and you can have a biscuit. So I was conditioned from literally as soon as I was weaned that food is used for comfort and food is a treat and an apple served with sugar is a treat. And, never mind eating a banana like a monkey. We'd have bananas mashed up with brown sugar on bread. And but it was all, this is a treat. We're doing a treat. Dad's making banana sandwiches as a treat. Stop crying. You can have this as a treat. And we're conditioned, and that wasn't just me, that's a lot of people. Stop crying and you can have a biscuit. Now, if she said stop crying and you can have a cuddle, I'd have been just as happy. But we make that connection, and then, of course, we get older and we watch Bridget Jones and all the other rom-coms that we see, and they all involve various stages of heartbreak and Haagen-Dazs pyjama parties. And we see Friends episodes and all the rest of it where they're all eating Haagen-Dazs for comfort. And through the media, this association with eating for comfort has been just motivated so many people's behaviour. It's scary. And in fact, just this week, I heard on the radio that McVitie's have done a year-long study into the emotional attachments with their biscuits. And guess what? They've invested another £1 million in their plant. And I think, well, if McVitie's are capitalising on the fact that they know there's a connection between feeling better and eating a biscuit, then do we really want to be led and programmed by McVitie's, or do we want to make our own choices? And I would say, and I think it's really important to mention, slim, healthy people eat biscuits sometimes. You know, I know there are a lot of sort of diet celebrities, if you like, out there who will never eat this and live off soya soup and all the rest of it. I'm not like that. You know, I went out for Sunday lunch this week and enjoyed a very nice creme brulee as a dessert. Thank you very much. And slim, healthy people do that sometimes. The difference is they don't do it all the time. And I would certainly not want to be seen as someone who was coming across as holier than thou. What I am saying is, if you think about the choices you make most of the time, and 80-ish% of the time you make good, healthy choices, you'll probably get a good, healthy body to go with those choices.
I think it's interesting nowadays when I see my clients that how many of them are treating treats as part of their staple diet. I have one client who's extremely fit, probably in her 70s, an amazing client, and she sees cakes and biscuits for high days and holidays, and that is how I was brought up. But nowadays the treats are for all the way through the day because you deserve it, and then a couple of glasses of wine in the evening, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. And if it's something that ultimately is causing you pain, how is it a treat? So if a chocolate brownie, to use that same example again, if a chocolate brownie means that A, you're going to die and not see your son grow up, and B, the time you are with him, you can't do anything but watch telly because you can't get off the chair, how is that a treat?
This is fundamentally feeding into the child obesity epidemic as well, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's not only what she's doing to herself, but it's what she's doing with him, because they bake a tray of brownies every day when he gets in from school, and she eats most of them and he has a couple of them, and the next day they do it again. It's scary, but it's happening everywhere, and we've got to stop it. You've got to take control, and if you don't program yourself, other people, the McVitie's and everybody else, will do it for you.
Well, I interviewed Gregory Ann Cox at the beginning of when I started interviewing about 2 years ago. She used to work for the food industry, and she talked on the interview about how the food was designed so that, you know, as one of the adverts says, once you pop, you can't stop, and it's designed to be like that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? It really is scary, and certainly, I mean, the whole sugar thing at the minute is come out of nowhere, and yet when I wrote my first book 10 or 12 years ago, I put in there, you know, how too much sugar means that you release extra insulin, and the insulin converts the extra sugar to fat. So this isn't new news, but of course the media, being the media, have blown it out of all proportion. And in fact, my latest blog was called "Don't Throw the Baby Out with the Bathwater," because I had somebody coming to do some work here in the house, and I said, I'll make you a carrot cake. And he went, oh no, I'm on a diet, I don't eat carrots, they're full of sugar. And I just thought, it's just ridiculous that the media can come out with this stuff and people take it to the nth degree, then wonder why they can't follow it and go back to, you know, Kentucky Fried Chicken dinners and all the rest of it. So there is a lot of misinformation out there, and there is a nutrition section in the book, and there is an audio section that you can get to go with it that explains how your hormones work, how you store fat. And I think the nutrition element is important, but you have to understand how to apply that knowledge. You can't just take it as a diet. It just doesn't work. It is a mindset.
Well, I don't know about you, but most of my clients actually know what is and isn't healthy. If I put the foods in front of them, they can easily select, then that isn't the issue.
Yeah, no, it isn't. And I think I say in the beginning of the book, this is not so much about what to do in terms of what to eat, although that is covered. It's more about how to do it. How to get yourself to not want chocolate, how to get yourself to want to eat less, and how to get yourself to want to stop when you've had enough instead of carrying on. It's the how-to that's really the missing ingredient. And for me, it's been, what's the saying, the elephant in the room that nobody's been talking about. And, you know, I've been jumping up and down for years shouting, saying, it's not just about what you eat. And some of the diets out there are reasonably healthy. Some are terrible, but some are healthy. But if you can't follow it, it doesn't matter. It's got to be how you change your mindset and how you make different choices. And that's the key. And what I have found, Debbie, is that when people follow this program, a lot of the feedback I get is, yeah, my body changed shape, but I feel so much more confident. My relationship's better. I had somebody last week say to me, I've just applied for a promotion, which I never would have applied for before. I didn't have the confidence, and I can't believe I've got it. And you can't help but get benefits in other areas of your life when you go through this program. Even if you don't want to lose any weight, just go through the mindset and how to change your mindset, and you'll get huge benefits.
Now, you mentioned Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief, which is one of my favourite books. Absolutely brilliant speaker he is. But and you're right, it is an absolutely astonishing account of how our thoughts literally change our biology of ourselves. And I think to understand this could be quite profound for people to actually, for people who are dieting, to truly get to grips with.
Yeah, I agree. And I am privileged to be a Hay House author. And Louise Hay, many decades ago, really paved the way for this connection between how you think and feel and various disease and illness presenting in various parts of the body. And of course, everybody thought she was stark raving bonkers. And luckily for all of us, she persevered and into such an amazing figurehead for this kind of thinking. And now we're lucky enough to have people like Bruce Lipton and Lynn McTaggart, who are coming along and providing the academic evidence to support the premise that how you think and feel directly affects your cells and can change you physically.
And of course, Candice Pert's book, Molecules of Emotion, is another one.
Yes, great book. Absolutely great book. And so it was having the background of reading all of those, and I went on a one-day seminar with Bruce Lipton, and I think I opened my mouth when he started the first sentence and just sat there open mouth for 8 hours and just drank it all in and absorbed it like a sponge, because it's just so lovely. When you feel something instinctively, and I knew even when I was 16, 17, that how if I could make people feel better about themselves, they followed the guidelines. No, that wasn't anything, it certainly wasn't anything I was taught in college, but I worked it out pretty quick that if you can make someone feel better, you've got more power to influence them. And so to have the scientific and the academic papers and all the research to support that has been an absolute blessing, I must say. And all of that is included in the book. And there is a balance of, anecdotes and stories and metaphors with actual quotes from scientific literatures and books such as Bruce.
And you referred also to Napoleon Hill in a book. Now, I see him referred to in your business books and your self-help books, but not so much in a dieting book like yourself. But these principles, when I started looking at them, were very, very relevant, aren't they?
Completely. I think that's one of the best books ever written. And certainly, if anyone's ever read it, Think and Grow Rich. It's the premise. It came decades before NLP or anything else, and certainly if you read it, that's where The Secret came from. And in fact, he uses the phrase "The Secret" in the book, and that's where everything that those of us who are following this holistic mindset path, if you read that book, it can almost all be traced back to that. I mean, I couldn't put it down, and I've now got it on audio, and I must have listened to it 4 or 5 times. But it's so powerful, and that's what I wanted to get across. I wanted my book to do for other people what that book did for me. And I didn't read that book because I wanted to get rich. I read that book because someone said to me, this is the best book on mindset that you'll ever read. And I have to say it was. And so I certainly unashamedly modelled mine on elements of that, which was why I thought it was important to say that in the book.
Yeah, and some of these principles, faith, desire, the auto-suggestion, the organised planning, and the visualisation, it got me really thinking about how it is far more applicable, wider than actually just the business arena. Yeah,
it totally is, yeah. And so, when I was reading it first time, I thought so much of this is what I'm doing with my weight loss clients. And I'd read a bit and I think, God, that's what I do. And so it was a huge inspiration for me to write the book.
He also refers to specialist knowledge, which most dieters have, don't they? Because let's face it, I haven't met one dieter that doesn't know the calories of absolutely everything they eat and the fat content.
I know. And I chat to some people and I openly say to some of my clients, your knowledge on calorie content of foods is better than mine. Mine's well run. I did my degrees a long time ago. But actually that's not relevant, because if you listen to your body will tell you what to eat and when to stop. And one of I'm working at the minute on a set of audio hypnotic trances to go with the book that will support each section. And the one that I'm working on at the minute is around the metaphor of a tree or a plant. And you look at a tree or a plant in nature that's beautiful, and if you go down into the roots and look at the roots, it takes only what it needs from the soil to be beautiful and no more. And I think if we all connect with that as a premise, then we'll do pretty well.
I actually work very differently than a nutritionist. Typically, it's more of a naturopath, but we were taught that it's all about intuition and about educating the individual to understand the choices that they're making and the effects it's having, so that they're empowered. So rarely do I actually take anything out of a diet. I always ask that things can be added and sort of drip feeded in, and we look at why, as I said, why the choices are made. Fascinating how, when I read your book, it was just so fitted with that philosophy.
Isn't it lovely when you get with like-minded people? It's a good connection.
It was beautiful. Now, I thought you have a fabulous acronym for negative thoughts given off by other people.
Don't read it out. Don't spoil it. Let people find that one for themselves. That was another one I had to say to my publisher, am I allowed to put this in? Luckily, they said yes.
But what you're saying is effectively, it might not be your own thoughts that you're actually taking on board. It can be other people's about you that you're now carrying around with you. It
really is. And I have to say, when I'm working with clients, not necessarily for weight loss, but for other things, if I'm working with someone with anxiety or depression, very rarely is it their stuff that's upset them. It nearly always, you can trace it back to, if I say to somebody, who taught you how to feel bad? And they go, well, I've always felt bad. No, you weren't born knowing how to feel this bad. Who taught you? Somebody showed you that. And it's amazing what comes out. And so most of the negative thoughts people have about themselves aren't even their thoughts. They're just rubbish they've taken on from other people.
And these thoughts fundamentally give you the experience that you're having in your life.
Yeah, definitely. And you make your values, your belief system is all set based on these, especially if it's happened during your formative years or at a traumatic time in your life. It really does form your values and beliefs, which is what influences all of your choices. We all make choices based on our beliefs.
And Napoleon Hill effectively shows that actually, through the research that he did for, I think it was Andrew Carnegie, that those people he actually researched into just didn't partake in the same level of thinking, did they? They had far more positive thinking. Yeah, completely. And one of them would just spend an hour a day in a room. In those days it wasn't necessarily called meditating, but he would have a thinking room and just go and sit and think for an hour and just allow his mind to empty, and whatever thoughts would come in. And that's what we would call today really is aligned with meditating. And fundamentally, he was pointing out that they have a strong communication with their unconscious mind, and they use the auto-suggestion and the self-hypnotic language.
Yeah, and you've got to be careful what you say to yourself, because you're always listening. One of the things that I sometimes do in my workshops is I'll get people to write down what's the worst thing they ever say to themselves. And then sometimes I'll get them to read it out and say it to the person next to them. And I remember the first time I did this, I said to this lady, right, okay, say it to the lady next to you. And she went, oh my God, no, I can't say that to anyone else. You can't talk like that to people. And this woman went, no, it's fine. You can say it to me. I know you don't mean it. And so I said, go on, just say it. And so she said, which I won't repeat because there's too many expletives, the most offensive comment I'd ever heard out loud to this woman. And of course, everyone in the room went, oh my God, well, you're love, I can't believe you say that to yourself. And I said, okay, well, let's see, to show her how bad it is, let's all give out everyone else's. So we went round the room, there's about a dozen people in the room, and everybody's was as bad. But they didn't think it was. When they heard the others, they were like, oh, you can't say that to yourself. And then they'd read theirs out, and it was just as bad. You can't get up in the morning and say to yourself, you fat, ugly, useless cow, you know, and that's minus the expletives. And then expect to make good choices throughout the day because you've just told yourself that you're fat and ugly and useless. And so your unconscious goes, oh, okay, then, well, I'll do fat, ugly, useless behaviours. So you've got to change your internal voice. It is so dangerous to have a negative internal voice. It is really one of the first things that has to be changed.
And that actually can be quite difficult, can't it? Because it is a habit that people have.
Well, do you know what? I have a saying which I love, which of all of these things are easy to do. The problem is, Debbie, they're also easy not to do. Yeah. And that's where choice comes in. And
choices, people forget that they have a choice in this, don't they?
That's right, yeah. And everything is a choice is a thought. And you've got to, it all tracks back to your thoughts.
Now, you talk about the power of placebo effect in the book to show how powerful your mind can actually be. And you talk about the surgeon who does the knee operations. And then Maurice Goodman, which is an extraordinary story, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Oh, incredible guy. And I was so privileged to see him speak. And I'd never heard of him. And we were sitting in the audience. And up came this movie story of this guy, this American guy who was in his 30s, flying a light aircraft, crashed it and broke C1 and C2 in his neck. And usually either one of those is a fatal injury. Anyway, he survived. They got him to hospital and they said to his wife, you know, don't expect him to last the night. But he made a very definite decision in his mind that he was going to survive. And so he was all wired up and on full life support. And they told him that, you know, he would never be able to move again. And he had different thoughts. And after a while, when they got him stabilized, they taught him, I forget the technical word for it, but it's using your eyes to blink to represent certain letters so that through blinking you can have a conversation. And so he had this conversation with this nurse who was teaching him this system. And he said, I will walk out of this hospital. And they immediately got the psychiatrist to manage his expectations. And this psychiatrist sat and said to him, you know, that you have to accept this is your life, etc. But he wouldn't have it. And prior to having the accident, he was really big fan of people like Zig Ziglar, and who wrote See You at the Top. And he was really of that mindset anyway before the op. And that's what saved him. And his wife played him these tapes all day, every day. And he gradually started to visualize. The first thing he started to visualize was that he would be able to breathe unaided. And by this time, he'd recovered some level of speech, but he was on a breathing machine. And so he every night would visualize his ribs expanding and reducing. He didn't know how they would do it, but he just believed that they would. He had absolute blind faith that they would. And after several months of doing this for hours and hours, night after night, he felt that his ribs were moving. And so he said to his doctors, I want you to take off the respirator and I think I can breathe. And of course, back comes the psychiatrist, manages expectations, And this went on. And eventually his consultant said, we will take it out for 1 minute just to prove to you that you can't breathe. You have severed the nerves to your diaphragm. It is physically impossible for you to breathe. And they took the respirator out and he breathed for 2 minutes. And they couldn't understand why. And they obviously put the respirator back in and then started taking it out for longer. And when he could breathe for long enough, they put him in an MRI scan to see how on earth was he breathing, because technically he shouldn't be able to. And his unconscious mind had trained other muscles to do the work of the diaphragm, things that were physically impossible, inverted commas, according to the medical establishment. And he used the same techniques, and eventually, less than a year after his operation, they wheeled him to the door of the hospital and he stood up and he walked across the threshold. And so we watched this movie and we were just all blown away. And then the curtains went back and he walked out on stage 35 years after the accident. And it was the most resounding, longest, most amazing standing ovation I've ever seen, and there was not a dry eye in the house. It was incredible. And he said, do not let anybody tell you what you can and can't do. Never, never, never underestimate the power of your unconscious mind. And that was, I will never, ever forget that moment. It was incredibly powerful. And if he can do that, Debbie, and someone's thinking, how can I stop myself wanting a biscuit? You know, you get a little bit of perspective. If your unconscious is that powerful that it can retrain different breathing muscles, you can learn how to look at a biscuit and go, nah, I don't want it.
Amazing. It is an amazing story.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And you're absolutely right. You know, when you... but I don't think sometimes we see these people enough in our society. I think the role models that are played out in the media are nowhere near as powerful.
No. Sadly, no. You don't quite see that on The Only Way is Essex, do you?
Not really. No. I hate to say it. And the celebrity diets are all around. It can happen, and it can happen really quickly, and it can happen overnight. And you just need to do this, and this. Follow it exactly, and actually you'll lose the weight. And a lot of people do, but actually they put it back on, don't they?
And the reality is that if you take a mind-changing approach, change does happen overnight in terms of how you think and feel. But you just got to give your body a chance to catch up. In other words, you change your behaviour instantly or overnight. That's what you want to change overnight. And then when you repeat that new behaviour, your body will represent that. And as I said, at the beginning, your body will then become a completely different shape and quality of vessel or carrier for the part of you that is the most precious. But your mind first, then let your body catch up.
Now, I found it fascinating in the book when you said more overweight people spend time thinking about what they're going to eat compared to how much time they actually spend eating. They tend to eat their foods very, very quickly, don't they?
Shovel it down, yeah. And the only time they don't think about food is when they're actually eating it, which is when you should be thinking about food. You know, you should, if you're eating something that's lovely, and especially if it's nourishing for your body. I think that mindset of I'm eating this and just imagining all the amazing things it's doing and all the healthy cells that it's building and all the powerful antioxidants and the life-giving force of what you're eating, and you're taking time to taste it and make that connection, that's when you should be thinking about food.
I remember my tutor telling us years ago when I was training as a naturopath that she'd been on this course and she'd watched this lad on the course eat this carrot, and he'd spent about 30 minutes looking at the carrot, experiencing the carrot, smelling the carrot, really kind of taking this carrot in on so many levels, to the point where my tutor was saying that she just wanted to run over and eat that carrot because he'd made it seem like so amazing. But he had a whole experience around the food, which people have lost, haven't they, in many respects nowadays with the fast foods.
They have, yeah. And that is one of the exercises that I do actually, is just take what you might think of as a normal food and teach people how to really taste things. And that's an exercise that also I've seen in the mindfulness book, which is also a really great book. And getting the correct association with the food instead of a false one because of something you've seen on a Bridget Jones movie.
Senses play such a huge role in satisfying eating, don't they? And keeping your weight down. Yeah,
they do. I mean, we're sentient beings. We're not like the trees and the plants in the metaphor I used earlier, where they just take what they need to be strong and beautiful and healthy and no more and no less. But we're sentient beings. We have to balance our emotions with that. And it's so easy to let other people train you or program you. And my wish is to empower everyone to program themselves.
And this is about the journey. It's not really about the end point, is it? It's about the journey you take through life, because it becomes something that you are and how you live your life, rather than actually this goal that you achieve and then you're on to the next thing.
I think when you start to feel really good and have genuine self-esteem, I'm not talking about arrogance now, I'm talking about genuine self-esteem and gratitude for who you are and the part of you that isn't physical, and you really get strongly connected with that part of you, then you suddenly, actually, as it happens, changed shape completely since I started thinking like this. And it almost becomes a bonus as opposed to the main goal.
So if someone was to today, after hearing this interview, set clear intention, what 3 things do you think that they should be taken away?
The first thing I would say is to honour your own personal integrity. There is a part of you that isn't physical. Your body isn't who you are, it's how you carry who you are. So my first point would be to really spend some time reflecting on that and thinking, actually, is this what I really want to carry and transport myself around in? The second thing would be, having accepted that, what do I want to put in, and what can I learn from looking around and watching other people and thinking about how nature works, and that if you really become intuitive, you can learn from your body what you need, how much you need. You don't need to go and get a degree in nutrition. It's not rocket science. The signs are all within your body, and once you open yourself to this way of thinking, your body will tell you instinctively what to do, and you can be guided once you really truly understand which foods bring pleasure genuinely and which foods bring pain. And there will be some surprises along the way. But that's a really interesting process of actually things I thought brought me pleasure, like the chocolate brownies, actually, when you really look at it in the hard light of day, bring massive pain. And then the third thing would be to have a long-term mindset, a forever mindset, to completely abandon the thought of doing something for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, but actually to change your whole belief system so that there is never going to be a time when you want to disrespect your body. There is never, ever going to be a time when you want to self-harm, that this is how it is, and that there's peace and comfort in the thought that you will never ever have to do an extreme drastic deprivation diet again, and that this is actually the first step to freedom from all of that, from all those diet chains that have probably held you down for however long. You can free yourself from all of that, have everything you want and more.
Freedom starts today.
Absolutely.
Now, Janet's latest book out is called Think More, Eat Less. It's a fabulous book, I have to say. How do people get in contact with you if they want to work with you, Janet? And how do they find out more about your work in general?
Okay, they can come along to my website, which is www.powertochange.me, UK, powertochange.me.uk. There's a contact page on there. If anyone's got any questions from this interview, then by all means, just whiz me over an email. I'm doing some weight loss retreats at Champneys and various other things. Well, they can just get the package and the audio downloads off of the website. But any questions, honestly, I really am more than happy to help people as much as I can. I passionately want to get this message out there.
And also, my understanding is that you run practitioner workshops in the approach.
Yes, I do. I train other therapists in how to run effective weight loss programs, and other practitioners in things like advanced language patterns. And my absolute other passion, which is thought field therapy. I also run 2-day thought field therapy courses, and that really is magic.
Can you just explain what the difference is between TFT and EFT?
Yeah, the concept of tapping was created by Dr. Roger Callahan, who sadly died a few months ago. And he discovered that if you tap certain points on the meridians, then negative emotions can collapse, providing you're holding that thought at the time. So if you have a dog phobia and you're thinking about a dog phobia and an instant you've had and you tap specific points, the phobia goes away. Gary Craig trained with Dr. Callahan and obviously learnt the process or the concept of tapping. He then adapted it to include some verbalization. So with EFT, you might say, as you're tapping, even though I have this fear of dogs, I totally love and accept myself. And you would tap all 14 points. With TFT, you might just tap 2 or 3 points and you don't say anything out loud. So they're both the same tapping points. They both use meridians. One is verbalized and uses all the points. TFT, and having trained in both is what I have found to be more effective. That's a personal statement. Is you just tap 2 or 3 points while holding the thought, and literally it collapses the negative emotion. And it's such a simple technique. And I was lucky enough to write Think More, Eat Less. We've spoken about Tapping for Life for Hay House, which teaches you how to do it. It's non-invasive. There's no negative side effects. You can learn how to do it yourself from the book, or come along to one of the courses on the website, and I'll happily teach you myself.
Super, Janet. Janet, it's been lovely talking to you today, I have to say. And your book is lovely. It's really, really nice book, and I cannot recommend it highly enough to people who are looking to take a different approach and are fed up with the normal diets. Thank you very much, Janet, for coming on Food for Thought.
Thanks, Debbie.